Welcome to Spirit Talks, because your spirit talks to you. Hello and welcome to Spirit Talks. I'm Susie Beiler.
And I'm Maximilliam Haver.
In today's Spirit Talk episode, we will be discussing sovereignty.
Thanks for joining us and enjoy.
This is a topic that has really come to the surface in my own life recently. And the way I understand it so far is that sovereignty is really about being in your choice. And this applies to every area of our lives. And my perspective especially, I think of as we extract ourselves from the matrix and the hologram, that is an expression of sovereignty for sure.
Now, would sovereignty, is that just another way of saying self-empowerment, or is there more to it than that?
It definitely has aspects of self-empowerment in it. For me, it goes a little bit further than self-empowerment because it also encompasses maybe like a full realization of your power. So you can be self-empowered on different levels. And my understanding is that sovereignty kind of takes you all the way to the top, if you will. Sovereignty is the full realization of your power. And of course, when I speak of power, it's not an ego power. It's the power of love, the power of light that I like to talk about.
Now, is this power at this ultimate level, recognizing that doesn't put you above anyone else or below anyone else? It's just saying that each is whole to themselves, right?
Yeah, it's not about being more than or less than or above or below or those kinds of categorizations. It's about being in your own self-realization of your power.
Mm-hmm.
And so as you navigate your life, you are looking at your choices and being very aware of your choices and even realizing that when you're not making a choice, you actually are making a choice. And so to be super tuned in and aware about the choices you're making. Like so, for example, if you have a job that you don't like, you feel like it drains your energy, but you feel like you're stuck there because you have to have it so you can pay your bills. And, this is a very typical thing that I hear. For me, you are making a choice to stay there and to some extent perhaps stay stuck. And that would not be what I would call being sovereign. So in that example, there's an understanding that comes through, at least for me in my understanding of sovereignty, that it takes a lot of trust to move into your sovereignty. Because it means breaking away from the systems, the old paradigms, the matrices. And it brings up a lot of fear in people, myself included. I went through my own process with that. So it means making our choices with a depth of awareness. And if you don't like that job, but you choose to stay there and you make that choice with full awareness of what you're doing, then you can move back into your sovereignty in that way. Does that make sense? So, yes, for me it is about freedom. But when you get a little deeper into the heart of it, it's the freedom about the choices that you're making. So if you're not feeling free in that job, but you, in your sovereignty, decide to stay there, then there's a freedom that emerges because you are making that choice with your full power.
So it's more like everyone makes their choices anyways.
Right.
So the difference here is the awareness and the presence in which you are making the choices that are adhering to your own energies and not foregoing your own energies in place of someone else. So not giving your power away, essentially.
Yeah, it comes down to where is that choice coming from? Are you making a choice unconsciously, or are you making it with full consciousness and honor for yourself? And those are two very different things. And so if we can move more towards making our choices with full awareness, full consciousness, full understanding and discernment of what we're choosing and how we're choosing, then we're moving closer towards being in sovereignty.
And there's a message that came through the recent channeling you did about sovereignty. Did you want to share a bit about that message? Any reflection on
that? Good question. Well, this was a channeling that I did with Etheria, my I Am Presence. And what Etheria spoke about was how when we are in our sovereignty, we really fully realize that no one and nothing has power over us. And that's part of where the fear comes from, is that perception that people or an entity or a structure might have power over us. So a big example that I see a lot is people, being scared of taxes and the IRS and that whole convoluted, made-up system that people are petrified of. Petrified of a phone call from the IRS, or petrified of a letter, or, whatever. And if and when we fully realize that those things don't have power over us, there's such a freedom. And it is empowering. You do have that feeling of being empowered. And so sovereignty relates to all aspects of our lives. Our finances, our health, our joy, our relationships. And it really does take, at the core, like we've talked about before in some of these spirit talks, is that knowing that you're worthy. You're worthy of being sovereign. You're worthy of being free. You're worthy of being in your true power. And until we really get that, we're not fully in our sovereignty. Now, like everything else, I believe it's a journey. It's not something that happens overnight for most of us. So there are those parts of the journey where you experience something to realize that it's something you need to release and transmute. It's an old pattern. It's an old program. Time to let it go and move on to something better. And as you do that step by step, then you get closer and closer to your sovereignty.
So does sovereignty relate to having more ability to navigate your experience, as, in reference to power? Or is it simply about the energy that you have behind your choices? It's
a good question. I feel it more as an energy behind your choices. The ability to navigate comes from just practicing in your life. With living, you gain experience of how to navigate such things. But it starts with the energy behind it.
How does sovereignty relate to the integration of your soul aspects?
Ooh, now we're getting somewhere. When you integrate more of your soul aspects, you have a much more expanded understanding of yourself, much more expanded understanding of how you navigate life, not only in this realm, but other realms. And so with that understanding, then you have the expanded consciousness and awareness in your choices. So I might make a choice to rest instead of push myself to do something, because I understand that some of my other aspects are working in other realms, and my physical body in this realm needs to take it easy while they do their thing. So it makes it a lot easier to make certain choices that honor yourself when you have the expanded awareness of how your soul aspects are working with you.
So as we integrate these soul aspects and we're able to more align our energies and focus our energies in our choices and the things we're manifesting, how is it how does that affect how comfortable our sovereign choices are? Because there's, if you're making a large decision and you're jumping away from a paradigm very suddenly, it can be uncomfortable, even though that's, what you feel resonates for you. So how can that integration improve or create more grace in the process?
Well, it's that growth curve thing, right? Sometimes as you grow more into your sovereignty, you then take those larger leaps, which feel more uncomfortable. So it's kind of a catch-22 that way. But underneath it, as you build your trust muscle, there is an ease and grace that can flow even when you are making those larger leaps, because you've built up the knowing within yourself that everything's okay. And so it's easier to take larger and larger leaps in that way.
I guess one other point that may be good to reflect upon is clarity on what you're actually wanting to create in your sovereignty, and how assistance and guidance may still be of assistance.
Absolutely. Clarity is a really big deal. And I would even go so far as to say you cannot truly be in your sovereignty if you're not clear. Because if you're not clear, you're emanating all of these frequencies that are disjointed and jumbled, and then perhaps attracting back to yourself those kinds of things that you weren't really wanting. And then, of course, you feel like you're not in your sovereignty because of that. So clarity is a really big deal. And that goes back to all the conversations we've had about releasing and transmuting patterns and programs and imprints and implants. And well, thanks for having this conversation with me, Max. There's a lot to say about sovereignty, and I feel like I'm just kind of coming into it for myself in a fuller way. So perhaps there will be a part 2 if we can have a deeper understanding of sovereignty. And I'd love your comments on this episode. What is sovereignty to you? What experiences have you had of being in sovereignty or not being in sovereignty? And one other thing I'll say before we close out is that it also has a lot to do with our frequency and vibration. So if we're in a lower vibration, it's going to be harder to be sovereign, because I think of it as rising above. Extracting from the matrix, it's like a rising above. And so you can't be sovereign if you're in lower frequencies or if you're embodying lower frequencies.
May you honor your choices and move forward to grow and expand.